Often fear and uncertainty and anxiety is a future projection. Fear of what happens, what will happen if the lion attacks me, what will happen if the gunshot hits me. But often in the present moment, and this is what I've learned a lot, trust that we always have the resources inside of us to cope with any situation. So this is where both Eastern and Western is that being present, being fully present to the situation, as opposed to the fear of what will happen if. Do you know what I mean? Like, thinking about what will happen right now, and having that deeper trust and knowledge inside of you that you actually do always have the resources inside of you. You do. You just have to really trust that and turn towards it and cope with it step by step, moment by moment.
Hi, I'm Chris Ippolito, and welcome to Get Coach 360, where I'm documenting my journey from employee to entrepreneur while featuring the coaches that are helping me along the way. Each episode, these coaches provide actionable advice to help me and you, the audience, find more success as entrepreneurs. I invite you to join the journey so we can go and grow together.
Welcome to another episode of Get Coach 360. In this episode, Chris sits down with Melo Calarco, mindfulness and high-performance coach, as well as lifelong mental health and well-being educator, who has devoted his life to educating people from all walks of life on the practical applications of mindfulness and meditation, and how they might contribute to a healthier and happier life. In addition to discussing formal and non-formal practices of mindfulness and meditation and their benefits, to include practicing what he calls snack meditations throughout the day to deactivate the stress response and stay focused in the present moment, Melo also talks about gently turning towards your fears, being fully present, trusting in yourself, and coping with any situation in the present moment. And, as always, we'll close with Melo sharing his advice for how you can take action now to level up wherever you need it most.
Hi, Melo.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing great. Welcome to the Get Coach podcast. Glad to have you on. I remember when we did our pre-interview call and I had mentioned that I had never had a mindfulness coach on the podcast yet. And I'm like near the end of recording my first 50 episodes, which is for the full first 4 year. And you were very surprised. And I'm surprised as well. I think you would agree it's such a huge topic and there's a lot of value in it. So I'm very excited for our conversation today.
Great. Yes. Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, you're welcome. So I'd love to, as I start every episode, I'd love for us to get to know you a little bit better. Do you mind sharing your story of and basically your journey as to how you became a mindfulness coach?
Sure. Yeah. Well, that's a bit of a long journey to get here. It probably started about 3 decades ago where I was immersed into meditation. Probably in a period of my life, early 20s, where I was a bit lost, directionless, not sure what I was doing, just sort of taking on any job just to make money. And then I found meditation. Actually, I found meditation through martial arts originally and practiced martial arts for many years. And then
Which martial arts?
Shaolin Kung Fu and Chen style Tai Chi, so very internal arts in many ways.
Yeah.
And I very quickly realized the importance of the mind and the importance of the mental strength, even more than the physical strength. So then I immersed myself quite deep into that and continue to practice it even to this day.
What they do a belt system in either of those?
Not really. No, we do. We only westernized version of it, basically. So we don't really get too caught up in that. But
I did karate. That's why I was wondering.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a practice that I've continued on, and really, martial arts or kung fu is in everything that you do. It's not just in the martial arts itself; it's in your lifestyle. So it's become a lifestyle for me. And that basically led me on a 3-decade journey of discovery and exploration, where I traveled around the world actually, and traveled around the world on my mountain bike, and I went through Africa and India and Asia and many parts of the globe, and wherever I was, I'd immerse myself into the spiritual practice of that area and stay in monasteries and temples and really dive quite deep into it. And that was an amazing experience. And I share that in my mindfulness practice today. I have quite a strong Eastern background, but also today I work professionally in corporate health. I work in mental health clinics. I do a lot of executive coaching. So I use the best of both worlds there. I draw on my Eastern experience and also share the Western clinical perspective. And that's led me to where I am today. And now I currently work in many sporting associations, many corporate companies. I do a lot of one-on-one CEO coaching. I love to break the skepticism around meditation. A lot of people have a skepticism or preconception that it has to be, sitting cross-legged, chanting Om, or having incense burning. So I very quickly break that, and I love to break that and realize the importance of it and all the many thousands of benefits from it. And it's a continual journey for me, and it's a continual practice that I constantly dedicate and discipline my time to do.
Yeah.
So it's
How long did you do the world traveling for?
A few years, yeah. So it was about 3 years altogether, and mostly living with Indigenous people along the way, and mostly staying with African tribes, and wherever I was, like I said, I'd immerse myself into the local cultural, spiritual aspect, which was absolutely fascinating and mind-blowing. And I learned many lessons. So yes, I am a certified mindfulness facilitator, and I do have papers to show me that. But really, I feel that I learned my lessons on the road. I learned my lessons by diving deep into some pretty amazing situations, and that's where I learned my lessons on fear, lessons on trust, lessons on resilience, lessons on really trusting yourself in all sorts of situations. So I draw upon that more than I draw upon my papers that say I'm a mindfulness coach, if you know what I mean.
Right. I think I would probably say that applies to a lot of forms of education, right? That you tend to learn more out in the quote unquote real world, applying and practicing and going through it versus just the book knowledge and the certificate at the end of it.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Coming out of that journey, what would you say was some of the more memorable moments, some of the stories that kind of always stick with you?
Oh, there's thousands of them.
All right, let's go with you'd mentioned the learning the lesson of fear. Is there a memorable story about that journey of learning that lesson?
Yeah, definitely. There's a few. And definitely in Africa would be some situations. Even just a border crossing is dangerous in Africa, and the dangers I learned. But one particular story that sticks out to me is actually in Nepal. I was trekking in Nepal. Just finished a trek up in the mountains. Came back to Kathmandu, and Kathmandu was in a horrible situation. This was in 2001, and I'm not sure if you remember, but the whole royal family was assassinated. The whole royal family.
I don't remember that.
Yeah. So what happened was the prince, Prince Dipendra, he actually put on his military fatigues, and he got a machine gun, and he walked into the royal family house, and he basically gunned down the whole family. And then it was pretty amazing. Then he turned the gun on himself, and he killed himself, but he was still alive on life support system in the hospital. And I'll cut this long story short, but basically the Nepalese people were angry, they were confused, they were scared, and I got caught in a procession that were actually there in respect for the king, because they loved the king. Birendra was his name at the time. They really loved him, but obviously he was killed by his son. And so the people turned a bit angry and hostile. And I was in this procession where suddenly there was, tear gas being thrown around. There was rocks being hurled. There was shooting. And all the males, they actually shaved their heads off totally, and they left a little bit at the back in respect for the king. So it was a pretty ugly situation, raising their fists, and it was, turning very ugly. And I didn't know what to do. It was the first time I probably felt real fear for my life. Hearing gunshot in the background, I was scattering in all those different directions and didn't know which way to run. Likewise, many people around me were doing the same thing. And then the funny thing that happened was actually a man who recognized us from our guest house back in Kathmandu. He said, come over here and come with me. So we turned to follow him. And the funny thing was, instead of fleeing away from the crowd, he actually turned towards the crowd and actually found a little route which went down to a river. So we went towards the crowd, and then we snuck down the side of this riverbank, and then we had to cross this horribly polluted river, knee deep in sewage, and then we had to make our way back to Kathmandu. So the lesson that I learned there was two things, basically: trust. Trust this fellow was leading us in the right direction, but also to turn towards the situation. To turn towards it, gently turn towards it, to face your fear or to look towards it. And I've used that a lot in life. Look at what the fear is, look at what the thing is that's happening, whatever the situation is, and gently turn towards it and analyze it and work out the best situation to cope with that in that present moment. And the best situation in that present moment was actually to go towards it and sneak down this riverbank instead of like fleeing and going in all sorts of crazy directions, not knowing where to go. It was actually go towards it and make our way. So that's been a really big lesson for me.
Yeah.
I've used that a lot in life. What's going on? What am I scared of? What's the fear? And gently face it and gently look at it and analyze it and respond mindfully with that.
Right. So from the perspective of the lessons you've learned from Eastern philosophy and Western philosophy, we'll still use the same term, where, I guess, what are some of the reasons why turning towards fear? Because it's very counterintuitive, right? Most of the time, even our natural instinct is to usually run away from fear. But in a case of something like this, having that presence of mind to go towards it, face it head on, and I think this would be my assumption based on books I've read and lessons I've learned through other podcasts, but do the Eastern philosophies and Western philosophies ultimately line up as far as why you would want to do that? Or do they come at it from different angles perhaps?
Yeah, I think there would be some different angles, but there is a common ground of, obviously we use the term face your fears, which is quite a strong term really, to face your fears. I think it's a bit strong. I like the term turn towards it, or, gently, lean into it, so to speak. But it really comes from that presence of mind. It really comes from being present, because often fear and uncertainty and anxiety is a future projection. Fear of what will happen if the lion attacks me, what will happen if the gunshot hits me. But often in the present moment, and this is what I've learned a lot, trust that we always have the resources inside of us to cope with any situation. So this is where both Eastern and Western is that being present, being fully present to the situation, as opposed to the fear of what will happen if. Do you know what I mean? Like, thinking about what will happen right now, and having that deeper trust and knowledge inside of you that you actually do always have the resources inside of you. You do. You just have to really trust that and turn towards it and, cope with it step by step, moment by moment. It's a really strong lesson I learned, and I use it all the time, and I still do. And it comes from both Eastern and Western, but in many ways, it's just a presence. It's just a simple presence.
Yeah. I'm wondering if maybe to help the audience out is define, but in your terms anyways, what is mindfulness, the practice of mindfulness? Because I have a friend who actually is a mindfulness coach, which I feel a bit bad that maybe I should have brought him on the show, but either way.
Next time.
So could you help, from your perspective anyways, what is the practice of mindfulness?
A simple practice, essentially, a simple practice of just being present, being fully present with what is, being in the now. People might describe it as being in the now, being in that flow state. And chances are you're doing it already. Think about things that you do that you love doing and you're fully present and fully engaged. That's mindfulness. So it's actually nothing new. It's not some fancy thing that we need to put into our life. We have it in us already. It's just a matter of bringing it out. So really, it's about being engaged, being focused, being present. And when I'm teaching executive coaches and CEOs, I don't even use the word meditation because it scares people off a little bit. I use the words like attention training or focus, and that's really what mindfulness is. It's training your attention to be in the present moment. Quite a simple philosophy by theory, but obviously with the busyness and the overstimulated world that we live in, our attention systems are being hijacked all the time. So it's harder and harder to stay focused, and that's where we need to actually spend some time to train our attention muscle in our brain, in our mind, to stay on track, and filter out the noise around us.
Yeah, actually, the very first episode I recorded was with Alan Funston, who we ended up touching on the topic of the attention economy and how attention has become such a valuable commodity and asset as far as the way our economy works. So, as you had mentioned, with everybody vying for each of our attention, there's a lot of value in developing a practice and an exercise to be able to maintain focus and in a sense like keeping your own attention to yourself and directing it in an intentional way. I feel like that's part of the mindfulness training, is it not? Is learning
Absolutely.
how to be intentional with your attention.
That's right, exactly. And research says that we are actually 47% of the time off track. Yeah. So of this
47%.
of this 30-minute podcast that we have right now, for example, people will be thinking about other things. So I really only have you for 15 minutes because our mind wanders off to other things. So 47%, it's a whopping 50% of our time, basically half of our attention. So we have to train our attention to stay on track, and train our attention with intention to stay on track. The other research says that a wandering mind is an unhappy mind. So when our mind does wander off and it starts ruminating about the past or thinking about the future, that's when ill mental health can start happening. Start thinking and catastrophizing about things that may never happen, but we spend our time and energy on that. So our attention systems are limited, and it's best to train them as best we can to stay on track, to stay focused, and have intention. And even starting your day like that, instead of being hijacked by your telephone by your bedside, first thing you do is you check your telephone and your attention's already gone into your telephone. You're checking your Facebook or whatever it is you're doing. Waking up with intention, waking up with the intention to start your day and actually own your day from the very time that you wake up. And that's one thing I could say to people, if you want to learn mindfulness, sleep. Don't have don't have the telephone by your bedside, and it's a great way to wake up mindfully. Start your day with a few breaths, for example, and to have a shower mindfully, have your breakfast mindfully. Then you can check your phone later and respond to what you need to. But our attention systems are constantly being hijacked all the time, and whatever we can do to take control of that is a great thing. And that's where mindfulness training can really help you.
Right. What does your typical morning look like? What's your morning routine?
My non-negotiable morning routine is I wake up and I do a few breaths just to wake up mindfully, and it might be just 5 or 10 breaths just to wake up slowly. Then I'll get up and I'll go for a nice walk, and rain, hail or shine, get up. That's non-negotiable. That's my exercise, just to get movement. And then I'll stop and do a seated practice of meditation. Sometimes I do a Tai Chi practice, some martial arts type of practice, but I always end with a seated practice of usually about 20 minutes. And then I'll go back home again and make myself a nice healthy breakfast and start my day like that. And then I'll enter my day mindfully. Then I'll open my computer or whatever it is I'm doing. I'm often running seminars and workshops, so I'll do another meditation just before that. But typically those three things are non-negotiable. Typically, and the good thing about that is if you do one thing, you can anchor other things to that one thing. For example, that walk anchors me to say, okay, after my walk, I'll do my meditation. Then after my meditation, I'll have a healthy breakfast. So it's a really great way to start the day. And then I end the day similarly. I end the day after I've done all my seminars and workshops and work. Then I'll end my day with a bit of Tai Chi practice or Qigong or some exercise and another seated practice of some sort. So they're two things that I never break, and I haven't broken that for pretty much 25 years.
Wow. That's as a lot of people would say, that's some great discipline. But I would say it's a great habit, because that's very different, right? It took discipline probably to start it. Now it's just become a habit and a routine. Are you doing 20 minutes in the evening as well?
Yes, typically. My typical formal practice, they call it in mindfulness, my typical formal practice is 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the evening. But I also do throughout the day little snack meditations, is what I call them. So between things. And they're probably the most powerful, to be honest, because they deactivate the stress response very quickly. So if I'm going between let's say an executive client, and then I'm going to a mental health clinic, and then I'm going somewhere else, I'll separate those with just a little 2-minute meditation or a 3-minute meditation, and just stop, deactivate all the stress, and let go of where I've just been, and then become fully present with where I'm going next. And that's really powerful. Those little 2-minute meditations are as important than the longer practice, to be honest.
And are you sitting down for that, eyes closed, and just working on breath work, or is there something? I guess what's your method of meditation? Because again, if the audience isn't familiar with it, there are very wide range of different kinds of forms of meditation. So what are you practicing?
I have a variety of practices because I like to be able to access meditation in any place, anywhere. So it doesn't have to be at home with my candles burning and an altar table. Yeah, because otherwise you'd never get to do that. I mean, that's an idealistic sort of world. But I can practice meditation at an airport. I can practice, on the train, and that's where I have a variety of practices. So one practice will be closed eyes. So if I'm in a safe place, in a safe environment, I will close my eyes. I might even practice in the foyer of a building just before going up to a seminar. I'll put music on and I'll just close my eyes in the foyer, which is safe. But sometimes not always in a safe place. So sometimes just, listening to some music or just coming into my breath. My breath is my anchor typically. And that's the one thing with mindfulness and meditation. The breath is often the common anchor we use to become present. So it might just be sitting on a train and following my breath for 10 breaths. It might be sitting in a park on a park bench, still with my eyes open, but following my breath for 10 breaths and just becoming present through the breath. Because that's one thing I did learn is the power of the breath and how essential it is to anchor yourself in the present moment. And that's one thing you always have control on is your breath.
Right.
And you have it on you all the time. So why not use it?
Yeah, it's a great asset. Are you familiar with Wim Hof?
Yes. Yeah. He does the 30 snatch breaths.
Yeah, his saying is "breathe, motherfucker," which is I always think that's funny because with his accent, it just sounds awesome. Are you following a certain breathing technique? Are you like certain amount of seconds in, hold out, like box breathing or anything like that, or is it just being more mindful of the breathing?
Typically, deep diaphragmatic breathing as the main practice. So the moment we can bring our breath down into our belly and into our body, we can deactivate that stress response and activate what's called the parasympathetic nervous system, the opposite of fight and flight. So that'll be the first practice, is to deactivate any stress or busyness around, just drop into that breath. And then myself personally, I do a variety of different breaths. I do what's called microcosmic orbit breathing, which is actually a breath that goes around the body. Sometimes I do a more invigorating breath where I do a bigger in-breath to give me more energy and a slower out-breath. So the variety of practices. But essentially, my first go-to is to drop my breath deeper into my body and expand the belly. So instead of just shallow chest breathing, bring it deeper. And as soon as you do that, your physiology changes, actually. You change your physiology and you initiate what's called the relaxation response. And then from there, I play little games with my breath and do all sorts of different things, depending on what outcome I want. If I want to be more energized, I'll do more energizing breaths. If I want to ground myself and let go of where I've been, I'll do more slow, prolonged out breaths, actually. So there's a variety of things. So, but essentially, that the first point is to drop the breath deeper.
Right. It's I mean, when you've been doing this as long as you have, I would assume you would want to have a little bit of a almost like a toolkit to rely upon, depending on, like you said, your circumstances, as far as your physical circumstances, then your mental circumstances, your environment, just all of that. That's interesting. I think as somebody who's practicing a pretty minimal amount of mindfulness and meditation, that kind of piques my interest as far as like, I wonder if there's what other things I should be looking at doing depending on my circumstances. I really like the idea of just doing kind of like micro throughout the day as required.
Typically when I teach, I start with that because that actually teaches people to be able to deactivate stress really quickly. It's a little quick trigger. So because a lot of people say they can't afford 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 15 minutes and they don't do the practice. And that's one of the common barriers is time. But just doing 10 minutes, just stopping throughout the day, 2 minutes or 90 seconds, it's a really powerful way to train yourself to actually deactivate stress and to activate the relaxation response. And the quicker you can do that, then you can then extend the practice later. But the first point of call, I typically teach deep diaphragm breathing and I typically teach micro meditations and then build up the practice like that because it can have adverse effects, especially with people with high anxiety, for example. To ask them to sit for 20 minutes is just impossible, or 10 minutes and actually more stuff starts rising in their mind. So just doing these little micro ones is a really good way to deactivate anxiety before it takes hold of you and sort of nip it in the bud. And I really think that's a very powerful practice. And even meditators that have meditated many years and they come and see me, I say, still do those little 2-minute ones because they're so powerful. And they say, wow, it's been a real game changer, throughout the day.
Yeah, it's like you said earlier, the practice of mindfulness and meditation is really, think of it as a muscle that you train and you develop, right? So I like, obviously it makes sense that you would coach this because it's very common coaching from anybody who teaches it, is you start small and you build your way up. You mentioned that one of the more common reasons that people say they can't start meditation is a lack of time. So we'll set that one aside.
Yeah.
What about the one, because I've heard this one a few times, of like they think like, I can't turn off my mind. I can't just sit there and not think of anything, because they think that's what meditation actually is to like dump out your mind and have it be empty kind of idea. When you have that that barrier being thrown your way, how do you reply to that as far as making them understand, the truth behind what the practice actually is?
Yeah, giving them permission to actually allow thoughts to come and go, and really helping them. You cannot turn off your thoughts. It's impossible. It's like saying, stop seeing right now, with your eyes open.
Stop your heart from beating.
Yeah, or stop hearing. Like, it's impossible. But you can allow those thoughts to be there in the background. And after a while, those thoughts will become less and less, and the frequency of the busyness will slow down. And the other thing I ask is to actually observe the thoughts a little bit. Just check out what they are. Just have a little observation from a third person point of view. What is that thought that keeps rising? And then just observe it, and then just gently let that go. And then the next thought will pop up. Just observe it. What's that one? Is that one planning or problem solving or thinking? Observe it, and then just let it go. And eventually, we don't attach to our thoughts. They'll eventually just slide away and disappear like clouds in the sky. They often use the analogy. And the spaces between the thoughts will become longer. So there's actually a space between thoughts. And the more you meditate, you actually create more space. And if you ask me what meditation does, it actually creates space. It creates space between a stimulus and a response. And those spaces become bigger and longer. So a thought will rise, and then there'll be a space. And then another thought will rise, there'll be a space. And when I get that barrier, and it's a very common barrier that comes through, is just allow your thoughts to be there in the background. Don't attach to them. Don't give them energy, and just let them fade away, and the next thought will come. Right. The other common barrier is I'm just too busy. I've got no time. I've got all these sort of things. Busyness is the one thing. But I say, how about if you stop for 2 minutes or 10 minutes? Your next 4 hours will be productive. Like really by stopping for these 5 or 10 minutes to reset, to refocus, to recalibrate the mind, strengthen all the neural pathways in the prefrontal cortex, which is the area of executive function. And then we can actually spend the next 2 or 3 hours in a much more high performance mode. So it's a barrier that I love the barriers, because that helps me to overcome them with my clients. And once they do, they say, wow, I can't believe I functioned without this. And I do a lot of work around burnout and executives that are high pressure jobs, or athletes in high pressure situations, and I do a lot of work with that. So I'd rather catch them earlier rather than later.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm glad you brought up the other one, because I was going to ask what's another common barrier, but the being too busy is another common one. When you'd mentioned kind of the physiological benefits of it, I was wondering if maybe we can dive into that for the audience that is a little bit more what is that, left-brained, where they're like, I need the evidence kind of idea. So what are some of the physical benefits that are gained from the practice of meditation?
One of the main ones that comes to mind is the deactivation of what's called the amygdala. The amygdala is that fear center, or that stress center in the brain. And that's that first point of call when you're in a stressful situation or under high pressure. That amygdala fires up and it sends an alarm through the body, and then it floods the body with chemicals, adrenaline and cortisol, to get you into that fight and flight mode to cope with that situation. So the more that you meditate, it actually deactivates that and makes it weaker. So it actually even physically can shrink. The amygdala physically shrinks. It actually makes it weaker. So then you're not so reactive to stressful situations. And then the polar opposite of that, it actually strengthens your prefrontal cortex, which I mentioned before, which is all about problem solving, planning, executive function, all those things that you need, emotional regulation, that you need to function through the day. So basically it flips it around, because when you work in a high stressful situation, your prefrontal cortex is hijacked, and actually your function, your ability to concentrate, your ability to focus is compromised. So that's one main one. And then that sends a whole message through the whole body to relax, and your physiology actually changes. So often we have hunched shoulders when we're stressed, or we have all sorts of physical symptoms that come through the body. But the more we can meditate, we can operate in a more calm and relaxed way.
Yeah.
So
can I ask a question on that? Because as you were saying that, I'm like, holy, that's crazy. Because I feel like that was the change for me as I developed the practice and went long enough. And perhaps there is no real answer to this, but how long would it take for somebody who's developing a daily habit of meditation? How long do you think it could potentially take before they start really getting those physiological changes? Is there a certain time frame? I'm sure it probably varies for most people, but is there perhaps like a bit of an average time frame?
Yeah, with an average of around 10 minutes a day. So that's usually the protocol in a way, 10 minutes a day, whether that's 5 lots of 2 minutes, or whether it's a 10-minute practice or longer. With an average of that, it's a few weeks. It's a bit like going to the gym. You go to the gym and you start exercising, you start noticing some muscles on your body, starting to feel a bit fitter. That usually takes about 3, 4, 6 weeks. So it's very similar in a way. You start noticing things within about 3, 4, or 6 weeks, and that's why I have a 6 week stress course, or a high performance course, and that's usually about the time frame with a regular practice. Having said that, people can actually feel it within days. Some of my clients that I have, that they say 3 days later, because what happens then, the whole body starts shifting. You start sleeping better. One of the best byproducts of meditation is you have a good night's sleep. And some of my clients say, wow, Melo, for the first time in a decade, I slept all the way through the night. Because you process your thoughts through the day or through the meditation. So then when you go to bed, you have a nice restful sleep. So then you start getting all these other physiological benefits just from even a few days of meditation and just initiating that practice. And that's why I do encourage those short snack meditations, those mini meditations, because every day you're just training your attention muscle to come back to your breath, come back to your body every day throughout the day. And that's cumulative over a period of time. And that could be a week, it could be 2 weeks, or it could be 6 weeks. Like I said, that's a typical time frame that I see. And it varies between obviously people's commitment to the practice and people's jobs and pressure and what they go through. But basically it's around about, there's actually research around an 8-week program also. That's a good time frame. So you don't need the dedication of a monk, 10,000 hours, which is the great thing.
60 days, which is, I think, pretty achievable for most people, especially at 10 minutes a day. Like you said, breaking it up into 2 5-minute segments, maybe one in the morning, one in the evening. The better sleep thing makes total sense when you think about the other physiological benefit of reducing the stress hormones. Because if your body is just ramped full of the stress hormones, you're probably not having a very restful sleep. Even though you're falling asleep, your body is just like firing on all cylinders. So you're just, you're not getting the deep sleep that your body really wants. For me, one of the biggest, it just kind of happened, and I guess I just noticed it one day, I was in traffic. It was during rush hour, and somebody, I wouldn't say that they cut me off, but it was close. They did something kind of stupid that in the past I would have raged, right? I would have got mad. I would yelled a little bit. I don't really honk my horn that often, but sometimes I would, but I would be upset, and I would feel that physiological reaction to that stress, just like the compression and just the adrenaline rushing.
Contraction.
And I remember it happened one day and no reaction. I just kind of went, jammed on my brakes real quick to avoid maybe a little fender bender. And I kind of I thought to myself, I was like, well, that was a dumb thing for that person to do, but I didn't physically react to it. And I was like,
Yes.
wow, that's crazy.
Did you use your breath? Did you use your breath? Did you
No,
breathe?
it just kind of happened that one time. And I was like, well, this had to have been from doing meditation. Like I can't think of any other reason that it all of a sudden stopped affecting me that way.
Yes.
So now I'm a lot more mindful when it does occur, and I do feel like the term I like to use is the blood boiling a little bit. I just make sure to take a couple quick deep breaths, and it usually subsides, and I'm good. I try and use that in basically any situation that the blood gets going.
And that's the other thing we haven't talked about today is there's also with mindfulness, there's two practices. One is the formal practice where you actually do close your eyes and you do the meditation and the breath work, which we've talked a lot about today. But there's also what's called the non-formal practice, and that's all those other 10,000 things that you do in your day, and you do them more mindfully. You know, from driving the car to walking to brushing your teeth to showering to eating, and these are all opportunities to practice mindfulness. So, for example, eating. You know, often we eat in front of the computer, or we eat on the run, or we eat, you know, without thinking too much. But if we can actually stop, enjoy our meal, enjoy the flavors, we can then bring mindfulness to that. And that's the great thing about mindfulness. It's not only those 10 minutes that you sit with your eyes closed, but it's also those other things throughout the day. You know, that's one invitation I say to many of my clients also is to, you know, find one or two things that you do and just do them more mindfully. You know, it could be the shower, it could be, you know, waking up in the morning, it could be eating, it could be communication, it could be just listening. You know, how do you actually mindfully listen to people? It could be, you know, anything, how you end your day mindfully. So all throughout the day you're doing a practice. You're actually practicing mindfulness just by being more present. And chances are you aren't present. You know, if you're in the shower for 3 minutes, is your mind really in the shower for 3 minutes? You know, your mind's flicking off elsewhere. If when you're eating, you know, are you really eating? Especially if you're eating from the computer. You know, research says if you eat in front of the computer, you get hungry 20 minutes later because your brain, your mind hasn't, you know, taken in the message that you're actually satisfied. So, and typically you crave carbohydrate, some sort of reward system, a bit of sugar or something like that, because you don't have that satisfaction, you know, region of the brain, you know, being triggered. So great opportunity to practice mindfulness. Go on.
I was going to say, do you know if that applies to eating while watching TV, or was there something in particular about the computer? It was TV.
Similar to TV, because really your attention is divided. Your attention is divided to two quadrants. So you're watching that television show, you probably get to the end of your meal and you look down at your plate and it's empty. It's like, oh, did I finish that? You know, or your sandwich or whatever it is. So it's well-known research that we get hungry 20 or so minutes later. And so if we can bring more attention to and eating is a great opportunity because there's at least 3 or 4 times that we eat in the day. Bring mindfulness to that and just say, okay, I'm just going to put my phone away, put away my computer, just eat my meal, taste the flavors, and then chances are you also eat less or eat slower, you know, chew your food. There's a good mindful eating exercise that is quite common where you eat a sultana or a raisin really slowly. It takes about 5 minutes and you eat it really slowly. It's a great exercise.
I couldn't do it. I'm a fast eater. Both my parents were in the military, so they were trained to eat quickly because you got a very limited window to eat your lunch or dinners or whatever it was. So I guess this is just more my theory, but because they ate quickly, I would model after that growing up. So now I'm a quick eater. But I should try that actually just to see if I could do it. So it's a raisin for 5 minutes.
Yeah, pop it in your mouth and just like before you even chew it or anything, get the flavors out. Actually, before you even put it in your mouth, you look at it and you see it and you observe it.
Okay, so you take 5 minutes total. Okay.
That's a bit of a luxury because when I learned it in the monastery and went to do it with brown rice, actually. Raw brown rice. Yeah, raw brown rice we had to put in our mouth. We had to break down the fluids. It took about 10 minutes actually before you could break it down. But then you bring all the sweetness out and you can do it with a piece of chocolate if you like, even better.
Oh, that's better. I like that. I'll do that. All right. Well, Melo, this is a really fun conversation. We covered a lot. What would be the one piece of advice you'd want to share with the audience to help them level up most?
Yeah, I think I'll give you two. I'll give you two because it's the formal practice and the non-formal. Number one is to choose one thing and do it more mindfully. Let's say for the next 7 days or for the next 21 days or 30 days, whatever you choose. So choose one thing that you do every single day and you do it in autopilot and you do it in default mode and just do that more mindfully, whether it's eating, whether it's showering, whether it's brushing your teeth, whether it's going for a walk. So that's one piece of homework. If you can do that and just try that out every day. And then the other thing would be to initiate even those mini meditations, just doing a 2-minute practice. If you're feeling a bit stressed or rattled and a bit busy in the mind and you've got too much work or a bit overwhelmed, just pull away for a moment and just follow your breath for a cycle of around 10. And that's around about 2 minutes. And then just keep doing that throughout the day and just build up that attention muscle. Once you start building that up, you can start doing the longer practices. So there's the two. Choose one thing, do it more mindfully, and then the simple little 2-minute meditation practices.
Yeah, I love that. I'm definitely going to do it myself because I think everybody could be more mindful. So I know there's at least one thing I could be doing more mindfully. And I'm going to definitely start incorporating the mini ones because I do a morning session. I should start doing an evening one as well. But I'll do the micro ones throughout the day. Well, that was, I thank you for that. I think that was incredibly valuable. A lot of people will take value out of this. Where can people find you if they wanted to learn more and reach out and connect with you directly?
Yeah, I'd say the easiest way is my website, melocalarco.com. You probably have it in the show notes, I imagine. Yep. It's got everything on there. It's got my email address and some resources and things. So melocalarco.com, pretty easy. I'd love to hear from you. I'd love to support you in any way to initiate a practice, support anybody in any way I can. That's my mission, is to share it with the world and especially the skeptics, like I said, and make it more accessible for you.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you very much for being a guest. That was a very pleasurable conversation. I feel very relaxed right now because as we were talking about, I was making sure take good deep breaths and just be very be present, right? Be very mindful with what's going on. So
exactly.
Thank you very much. I look forward to probably some future conversations.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. And thanks, Chris.
Take care.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to Get Coach 360. If you're looking for more information, you can head over to our website, which is getcoach360.com. You'll find the show notes for this and every other episode there. And if getting actionable advice every week from professional coaches is something you want more of, then make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes.